Hey everyone, if you're a startup or if you're a small tech company, if I may, or if you're a product-based company, in that case, this video is specifically built for you guys where we are going to discuss in detail how you can make sure your AWS infrastructure is secured. Now, why I have made this video for a very specific reason. All the companies, majority of the companies are shifting to AWS and they're using it. But the problem is yesterday itself, I saw there is a big company which leaked the data from AWS. AWS was not to be blamed, it was the company. So in this video, we are going to dig deeper and understand how you can make sure your AWS infrastructure is secured. Okay, let's start with a very basic point, or I should say this is one of the point which I made mistake. I have seen a lot of people making the mistake in the industry. And when I was discussing with few architects of AWS, they told me that this is one of the worst mistake made by people. They are not rotating their keys. Now what happens? A key is something which is basically sort of a gateway to your infrastructure. Whatever permissions you have given, it's available in the key. The person does not have to do anything. The code is available on the internet freely and he can do anything he wants to do with your key. So you have to understand that you have to have a policy where you will be rotating those keys. Now, there are various tools which actually look into these security things and they tell you what are the various security things which you are supposed to find, or I should say supposed to maintain. But this is something which you have to keep in mind, that the rotation of key is quite important. Now, if you were my mother, you would have said, Avinash, this is something I know. Well, two-factor authentication, it is available irrespective of what you're using. Either you're using Gmail account or whatever account you're using, it is there. But majority of the people, believe me, I was talking to a person who is working in that tech industry and they did not implement this thing, two-factor authentication, and their company was actually facing issues with AWS infrastructure because people were attacking their account. So you have to understand, it sounds very simple. Okay, I'll be following that two-factor authentication. AWS is providing me the security, so why should I be worried? Well, if this is something which is available, which is recommended by AWS and many people, personally, if I talk about whatever accounts we manage, we make sure every single account which is being used in AWS is having two-factor authentication. And the best part is AWS has this feature where you can implement this thing by default. So if you're creating a new user, he or she has to implement a two-factor authentication. Without that, it will not work for you. So make sure all your accounts in AWS infrastructure have two-factor authentication turned on. Now, the next point is quite important. Usually what happens when a person joins as a CTO, a person who is responsible for their technical stuff, they keep their personal information, their personal accounts as the root account details of your AWS infrastructure. Now, what happens? Let's say something happens, the person is not available. You won't be able to regain your access because obviously you are not the root user, and as per the policy, they cannot allow you to gain the access. So it is better that you review these information every 6 months. It is not going to affect you. It is not something which is very brutal. It is not something which is very lethal, but I would say that you should keep your information up to date. Keep your information related to accounts which company can access anytime irrespective of what is the situation. The best thing is you will actually keep a tab on it. Take 6 months, every 6 months you are going to monitor it if the information which is supposed to be there is there or not. The best part I suggest is always, if you're using your AWS account, create your AWS account with the @companydomain.com.in, whatever that is. For a very specific reason, you control that domain. You are not going to lose the access because ultimately your company is the owner of that particular domain. Keep your secrets as secrets. Now, this is very funny. For a very specific reason, people don't do that. I have seen what people do. They're going to take an AWS key, which let's say has the authority to delete something. And they're going to say something like key equals to, this is the key. What I want to say is that you're going to keep this information out of your code base. Do not keep these things in your code base for a very specific reason. Anyone who has access to the code has the access to this particular key. Now, there are various ways of doing that. There are so many tools available. There are so many mechanisms available. If you're a startup, if you need with help, obviously we can also help you. But what I want to say is you have to make sure that you do not make these mistakes, because they are going to ultimately impact you. So keep your secrets in a secret place. It is always recommended follow what is the best practice given by AWS, because they are the one who are able to implement at a huge scale. Now, recently we were actually working with one of the client, and when I asked to their developer, like, how do you access your AWS account? So he said that I have the root access, I have the root credentials, and I just simply log in with the root account and I start doing the stuff. The person was working in a junior position and he was not even AWS guy. He was a web developer. Whenever he wants to ship the code, he would actually log into the AWS account as a root user. He would upload the code and he would log out. Now, this sounds very fancy, and obviously I have also done this. Again, since I was the owner of it, I understood that I can do that, but you should not be sharing your password. It is better that instead of sharing your root password or whatever passwords you have, you create a IAM group, policy, or a user, so that if something goes wrong, you can control, you have the 100% authority using that, because once the password is shared, at least we consider it is gone. Now, this point is going to follow what I've already discussed in the previous point. It is simply means follow least privilege policy. So like if I'm supposed to just do this amount of work, do not give me the access to do this kind of work. Do not give me these level of privileges which I don't need to perform my activity. Because obviously if I am doing that, I'm not going to say that you should not trust your coworker. Again, I'm not saying that. What I mean is you should not trust something which you cannot control. What do I mean by that? Obviously, there is a good possibility that your coworker has a weak password. Some website, some random website has been hacked and they came to have his password. Now he is actually that attacker is trying to gain access to your AWS account, and obviously once they gain access, they can do anything. So it is better that I will provide as least as whatever privileges which are required by him, so he or she can do their work, and obviously it is not going to affect my infrastructure. Now, I have interviewed around 10 different people who are working in various organizations, and they have told me that this is something which they have seen or they see on a regular basis whenever someone contacts them and says they are facing an issue with their AWS infrastructure related to security. What people do, if you have to give any privileges, they give privileges to an individual user. But the problem is, individual user at a very big scale, it becomes very difficult for us to maintain. Let's say you have 200 people. Okay, let's talk about in a startup, you have 50 people who are working in your company. Now, what is one of the worst problem? If you're going to give privileges to those individual 50 people, it is going to become a chaos. It is better that you give those policy to a group so that you can remove or add whatever permissions you want in a single click. So you don't have to do it for all the 50 users individually, one after the other. So please make sure that you follow the group-based policy compared to individual user policy. Now, AWS is something which is known as CloudTrail. This is basically sort of a log system. What is happening with your infrastructure, it is there. But the problem is, if you are not the root user and let's say someone else has created, it gets difficult for you to access. You have to give the privileges and you have to do a lot of stuff. So it is better that this CloudTrail log, if I may, is centralized. What happens when it is centralized? Everyone in your company can access that. What we have done for few of the clients, we have taken the CloudTrail and we have actually given them the access to their particular dashboard. So everyone who has or who is supposed to access that information gets the access of that information instantaneously. This actually helps you find what can go wrong anytime. Let's say at 2 a.m. in the morning, you found someone is actually misusing certain resource. So you can find out who that person is. It can be someone who is not supposed to be there. It can be someone who was not supposed to get those privileges, but somehow he or she got those privileges. So you can actually find that information whenever you want. So it prevents something which is basically a spark becoming a fire. So please make sure that you have your CloudTrail logs in your centralized position. What I would personally recommend, keep these logs in your dashboard so you don't have to create any new permissions. So these are the few security features which I would recommend you should follow. I have actually done a huge research. I have talked to 10 different people who are actually working in the AWS infrastructure, and they have suggested me. Obviously, these are not the all features. If you feel like that you need help, if you need some suggestions, or if you want to understand what are the various clouds with which you can actually automate, not cloud, obviously the tools with which you can automate, obviously reach us. We can actually provide you, we can actually help you make sure your AWS infrastructure is worrisome, so you don't have to call someone at 2 a.m. in the morning and inform that something is about to go wrong.